Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Poland's political landscape is heating up as Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski vie for Civic Coalition's nomination in next year's presidential election. Now, both brings distinct strength to the race. Sikorski with his expertise in international relations, and Trzaskowski with strong appeal among younger progressive voters. Their unique backgrounds could set the tone for Poland's future direction. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss these dynamics is Bartosz Kielak, an international journalist. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hi, Ben.
So can you first help us set the backdrop? What are the key differences between the two presidential candidates?
Well, in terms of the attitude they have towards Europe and towards the US and towards international politics, there's not that much difference between them. They are both men of considerable experience when it comes to foreign affairs. Obviously, Sikorski having served as a Minister of Foreign Affairs for many years, but also let's not forget that Mr. Trzaskowski, before he took over the city office in Warsaw, he served as a deputy foreign minister. He served as a full minister, but in a slightly different capacity. And obviously, he was an MEP, a member of the European Parliament, and a member of Parliament as well. The singular advantage that Sikorski enjoys over Trzaskowski is obviously the fact that he had considerable experience in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, when he was much younger. But they're both Western-educated men with very much pro-Western attitudes.
Right, like you mentioned, Sikorski does have a very strong background in foreign and defense policy. Do you think the backdrop of the war in Ukraine would give an advantage, especially, well, with the conflict still ongoing and with the unpredictability of a Trump administration in the United States?
Again, this isn't something that I would differentiate between the two men when it comes to experience dealing with Ukraine. When Sikorski wasn't a minister, when he served as a member of the European Parliament, he was very actively engaged in not only advocating on behalf of Ukraine to garner more support from Western allies and partners of Ukraine, to deliver more weapons and supplies to Ukraine. He himself has organized a trip to Ukraine, I believe, with a former Prime Minister of Sweden. But to a similar extent, Mr. Trzaskowski, as a mayor of Warsaw, has been working closely with not only mayor of Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, but also European mayors such as Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, or the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. And together they've been planning on a response and basically how to aid Ukrainian cities in rebuilding after the war. Back in 2014, during the first iteration of this conflict, Sikorski was pivotal in securing Poland a seat at the table in the peace negotiations that followed. And I think that's the key objective that the Polish Foreign Service has currently, that any future peace negotiation when it comes to war in Ukraine has to be conducted with Poland at the table. Currently, obviously, that's not necessarily something that's happening. I think that both Trzaskowski and Sikorski are more than capable of achieving that with the right degree of cooperation with the government.
Right. And when it comes to the current Warsaw Mayor Trzaskowski, he nearly actually won the presidency in 2020. Do you think this experience would give him an edge?
So the news of an internal party contest that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks, that broke today. But not only for many months or years we knew that both men foster presidential ambitions, both men have tried already to attain the office. Back in 2010, when Sikorski was facing off the now former president Bronisław Komorowski in presidential primaries, he failed at that. And then obviously we had the 2019-2020 presidential campaign in Poland when Trzaskowski failed to beat the incumbent Andrzej Duda, and Andrzej Duda stayed on as the president. They have the experience of running a campaign, and my sources in Warsaw, my sources, people who know them personally, despite the fact that they've both publicly have denied any intention to run for president for a very long time. local elections in Poland, when Rafał Trzaskowski said that he only intends to stay as a mayor of Warsaw and support the city's denizens. To the same extent, Sikorski for many months denying and indeed trying to shoo away any indications that he might be planning a presidential run. But if you look at their career, if you look at their education, if you look at the fact that Sikorski wrote a book, How to Make but Poland Can Be Better. I don't think you write a book titled this way if you do not foster presidential ambitions.
Very true. And well, when it comes to younger left-leaning voters, they mostly back Trzaskowski in 2020. Do you think they will be as enthusiastic this time around?
Well, the young vote is the one that both men will be hoping to galvanize, but I don't think it's necessarily the vote that's going to show up for them in this election. On one hand, you have the fact that Trzaskowski is immensely popular in big urban centers, that he can count on the liberal support and some of the left-wing support in Poland. Sikorski, on the other hand, has always been recognized as more of a conservative figure. But in recent months, it's become clear that they both support some of the more liberal, left-leaning policies on behalf of the Polish government. That is, support for abortion, support for some sort of a recognition of same-sex partnerships. There's gaffes that both men have become known for. Sikorski obviously had been recorded secretly as a manner of espionage years ago, and some of the things he said will be inevitably be drawn out during the campaign. The conservative circles in Poland accused Trzaskowski of taking the crosses off the walls in Warsaw offices. I don't necessarily think big urban centers and liberal voters there will be the ones deciding this election. Who they want to appeal to is obviously little cities, little towns, and the countryside. People slightly more conservative, inclined slightly more right wing. And for many years, it's been thought that Sikorski is the man to do it. That he's because of his background, because of his very patriotic inclination, because of the fact that he's a very recognizable statesman. He'd be the one to do that. And despite the fact that Trzaskowski is immensely popular with the party, in recent months, when you've been watching the government narrative and how Sikorski's been responding to world events, there's been marks, very, very obvious marks that he's been trying to attain a public image and subscribe to a narrative that would resonate with that group of voters.
Right, like you mentioned, traditionally Trzaskowski is seen more as a left-leaning candidate, while Sikorski is seen as a more conservative candidate comparatively. Do you think that looking at recent global election trends, the one taking place in the States and some of the election trends in Europe, that would signify perhaps the Civic Coalition this time will be more favorable towards a slightly more conservative candidate?
Well, there's always a question who's going to be the candidate on the opposing side, on the right-wing side, who's the Law and Justice Party and the current presidential going to support in next year's election. Out of the candidates that currently have been put forward, there's some that are barely recognizable media-wise or on the domestic or international political scene. There's some men who have indeed not only appeared on international media and international news channels. There are men with widespread connections. We no longer really discuss the candidacy of Marcin Mastalerek, who's the chief of the president's cabinet, but his network of Republican connections on the US side not only has been crucial in fostering the relationship between Donald Trump and Andrzej Duda. In the past couple of days, this man has been in the US negotiating what we now know to be President Duda's visit to newly elected President Trump. A former presidential advisor, chief of the Presidential Bureau of Foreign Policy, I believe, now serving as a member of the Polish Parliament, Marcin Przydacz. I know him from in a capacity as a guest in my interviews at the BBC, but I've discussed him as a person with a number of Polish politicians, including the foreign minister Sikorski. And it's difficult to get a praise towards a member of the Law and Justice Party out of Sikorski's mouth. But he wasn't too critical. He said that Przydacz has indeed shown himself capable in conducting Poland's foreign affairs. And let's not forget that the president of Poland, his chief role is representing the country abroad.
All right, and going into, this rivalry between Sikorski and Trzaskowski during the electoral campaign, there's always a burning question when it comes to primary of whether or not this could cause a rift within the Civic Coalition. What's your take on this?
Well, it also depends on the coalition partners. Mr. Hołownia has long been known to also foster a presidential ambition. The support that he managed to achieve in the last year's parliamentary election has kind of melted away. But still, a candidate on behalf of Donald Tusk's party who'd be supportive of a change to abortion, a liberal change to abortion rights, is not feasible to people like the defense minister, Kosiniak-Kamysz, or indeed the speaker of the Polish parliament, Mr. Hołownia. So once we get over that obstacle and whoever represents Mr. Tusk's party in next year's presidential election manages to secure that support of coalition partners, then he has to reach out to wider group of voters across the country. He has to make sure that, the Catholic leaning, and we still talk about the country where between 50 and 80% of people regularly attend church. We have to consider that they would have to get the support of people in the countryside and little towns. But then the other side is obviously there's the left-wing party, the left-wing alliance in Poland, which hasn't necessarily always been aligned with the government, and they will be exerting pressure not only on Mr. Tusk but on any candidate that Mr. Tusk's party chooses to adhere to some of the left-wing ideals. In that case, probably more social support and more support for social policies that the left-wing alliance would like to see. And whichever way really the presidential candidate chooses to go, he'll be making enemies along the way.
Right, that is unfortunate truth of politics. But meanwhile, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World. Thanks. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.